Mm.
Let's see, most of us here. Give like another minute just in case. Let me make sure. Let me count. Maybe one more person. We may be missing one more person. Yeah, maybe one person. We'll get like a minute and then we'll get started. If you haven't already, remember to rename yourselves. I mean, we've been together. This is what, the fourth time? Oh, okay. Naomi is having some connection issues. What, this is the fourth time, but put your put your district in. So it'll be helpful as Sarah helps us take a few notes so we can know which district is speaking. Okay, so we're going to get started and we will catch Naomi up when she joins. So happy June, everyone, and happy fourth training. Can you believe that we're already in our fourth training? This session today will be preparing for the July convening that is right around the corner. We have been talking about it internally, and I'm just like, y'all, we have time, and we absolutely don't have time. There are things that we have to do, and so we're already in June, and July is right around the corner. So this is what this session will be about today. So, session overview. There are three sections. The first section will be about data storytelling. And yes, thank you, Alex. Alex has dropped the note catcher in the chat for you all. That was also emailed to you yesterday. Section two will be about data storytelling in action. And then section three will be preparing for questions and pushback. Objectives. At the end of this session, you will understand the importance of data storytelling. You've had the opportunity to review the template convening presentation that we have put together for you. You'll be prepared to create your district presentation for the convening, and you'll be prepared to handle questions and pushback at the convening. So let's get into section one, data storytelling. So, what is data storytelling and why is it an important skill as we prepare to create data dashboards? In the simplest definition, data storytelling is taking numbers and translating them into a language and story so that everyone can understand it. It is communicating data in a clear and compelling way. As stated by Stephen Few, numbers have an important story to tell, but they rely on you to give them a clear and convincing voice. So, too often, data storytelling is interpreted as just visualizing data effectively. However, it is much more than just creating visually appealing charts and dashboards. Data storytelling is a structured approach for communicating data insights. It involves a combination of three key elements that you see here, and that's narrative, visuals, and data. So each component plays an important role in their own, but the true magic comes when they are all applied and put together. So the first component of data storytelling is the narrative, the verbal or written storyline that is used to communicate insights gleaned from the data, the context surrounding it, and actions you aim to inspire in your to your audience when you're telling the story. The second component is visuals. These are the visual representations of your data, including the charts, the graphs, the diagrams, and the pictures that you will use. And then the third component are the data. The data is the foundation of your data story. The analysis of the data enables you to understand its full picture. When you combine the right visuals and narrative with the right data, you have a data story that can influence and drive change. The brain's preference for stories over pure data stems from the fact that it takes in so much information every day and it needs to determine what's important to process and remember what can be discarded. During today's session, we're going to walk through each of these components and prepare you to tell your data story at the July convening. So I thought this was a really, really cool visual to show. So when neuroscientists observed the effects data hold on an audience, brain scans revealed it only activated two areas of the brain associated with language processing. However, when someone is absorbed in a story, they discovered it stimulated more areas of the brain. People hear statistics, but they feel stories. When someone hears a story, multiple parts of the brain are engaged. And when multiple areas of the brain are engaged, the hippocampus, I think I said that right, which stores short term memories, is more likely to convert that experience into a long term memory. When you package up your insights as a data store, you build a bridge of your data to access the influential emotional side of the brain. You know how it is when your friend tells a good story and then you can like retell that story because they tell it so well. That's what we're hoping to happen when we tell a good data story. So we're going to stop and think for a moment. So we want you to drop into the chat your experience with data storytelling on a scale from 1 to 3. So either you're a beginner, you're an intermediate, or an expert. And then we want you to share your experience with data storytelling, any experience that you've had with data storytelling. So you can drop it in the chat. You can come off mute after you drop your 1, 2, or 3. Or you can just drop your experience in the chat. We'll capture it. I see some ones. I see all ones right now. I see all ones. Oh, this is great, Alex. Okay, so I see all ones. Okay, I see a 2. Um, so mostly discussing student data in PLCs. Yes, yes. And that is an example. Okay, so we're mostly at the beginning stage as relates to how we're talking about using the data that we have. So, one, as an English teacher, I've discussed with students the importance of logical and emotional appeal in arguments. However, I don't like speaking data much. I don't like speaking data much either. But it is super cool when Alex walks you through how to do it and bring it to life. As a former English teacher, Alex and I, that's why we work so well together. Okay, so I think we're set at least twos, just don't realize it. Yeah, yeah, you're probably in a 2. Most of us are probably in a 2. Thank you for doing that. So, section 2, data storytelling in action. And we're going to talk about the July convening. We're going to give an overview of the July convening. And so, these are the objectives um, for the convening. So, teacher researchers, that's you. You will disseminate your findings and share recommendations on actions to take. And so, you will also have a practice run of this at the June DQI team meeting at the end of June. I think it's June 26th or June 27th. It's on the calendar. But you will have a practice run to actually share your findings and your actions to take. The DQI teams will walk away with 1 to 3 prioritized needs based off the data that you share, the findings that you share, and some data that they have collected. DQI teams are introduced to and prepared to complete the root cause analysis that we will walk them through. And then all participants are able to identify insights on common teacher time challenges and actions recommended from peer district presentations. So you will not only be presenting, you will also be learning from others and listening to what others have learned from their research, from their studies. So we are going to take about 5 minutes and we're going to drop the presentation template in the chat for you all. We're going to give you 5 minutes to independently review the teacher researcher template presentation. By the end of 5 minutes, we're going to come back and we want you to just share out any wonderings you have about the convening and about your district presentation. This is a template that we have created for you all to then drop in your findings to make it a little bit easier for you to create your presentation. So we're going to give you about 5 minutes to look at the template and then we'll come back at 3:45 to talk about to have share outs. We're at 3:40. Thanks, Alex. We're at 3:45. Would love to hear some wonderings and questions that you have about the template, about the convening, um, your district presentation. Would love for you to come off mute and share.
One thing that I'm wondering is how we're going to kind of work together to narrow the scope of like all the things that we've been talking about to make it into 3 actionable suggestions for our district.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I'm curious.
And that's, oh, sorry, Stephanie.
You're fine. I'm curious if the district presentation is going to be the exact thing that we present on July 9th. Does it change at all because we have a different audience?
No, what you're presenting to the district as a run through on the June 26th coaching call is what you're planning to present on July the 9th at the convening. It is just giving your district an opportunity to see what you're presenting to the audience on the 9th, but it's the same presentation. It just gives them an opportunity to see it first. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Mhm. And Alex, what were you going to say in response to Mr. Davis's?
Yes, I was just going to say that's perfect because that's exactly what we're going to be covering today.
Yeah, giving you all time to think that through. Yeah. Any other thoughts? Good questions, good wonderings.
I had
Stephanie,
one.
oh,
Sorry,
Naomi.
go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, along with Stephanie's question and thoughts, where it kind of gives you guys a trial run just to see if there is anything you want to change, if there's any confusion or clarity that your district team can provide you, that if you do need to make any updates between the coaching call where you presented and the convening, you have an opportunity to make sure it's all clear, as well as them getting to see it. And then also that morning you all will present, but that afternoon you will still be supporting your district teams. So knowing your data really well will be super helpful because you're going to start transitioning into a consulting role where you're the teacher's voice in this for your district. So that'll be that, that support that you can provide in the afternoon after you present in the morning.
What I was going to share just kind of goes off of that first comment that was made. Our district had a lot of general things that matched from primary up through high school, but then the details involved with each one were kind of very specific depending on our campus. So looking for those overall themes that would help everyone, I think is going to be where we're going to have to really focus for us.
Mm-hmm.
That makes sense. And, we were definitely just continuing to say how much we're learning here. And so this is going to be the first time we're in the phase 2, phase 3 process. And so if you need help with anything, just let us know. As you all, if you're finding some roadblocks or you're hitting walls on like we can't find an overarching theme, reach out to us and see if we can help. Maybe sometimes an outside perspective will help you to see that. So just let us know.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I think that leads perfectly into your next section, Alex.
All right, so as Mr. Davis perfectly prepared us, where we're going to be going through how to actually do this. First, I want to emphasize and share an example presentation that we've prepared using the template. This is obviously all fake data. We're going to walk through this in greater detail. But just so you know, you have an example. In the template, you'll also notice in the notes that there's timing that's provided. This is just kind of an example of like 2 minutes on this slide, 2 minutes on this side. Each district will have 30 minutes to present and 5 minutes for table discussions. You guys have a lot of data, so we want to make sure that we're staying on within our time boundaries. And so I would just be mindful when you're looking at those. In the example, there's also the slides and then example narrative. This is just to kind of show you along with like telling the data story of how we would talk about what data is presented, how we would tie in the narrative that's written on the slide with the visuals. Again, all completely faux data, but just an example. And again, we'll walk through this later on during today's session. But first, we're going to walk through how you're actually going to wrangle all of this data that you've collected into one presentation. Remember, each of you have data from all three of those different tools for each of your districts. So we're actually going to walk you through 6 steps in the upcoming slides, but we want to start and really emphasize that this work is all going to be done collaboratively. You've kind of been working more in silo at your campus, but now we're really meshing all of the findings together to be able to come up with that district presentation and district recommendations. You'll utilize this creating your data story brainstorm document as a starting point. So I am going to quickly share my screen and walk through this document. Make it a little bigger. They kind of give you an overview. So what I would do is when you guys are able to, we'll have planning time later in the session, but when you guys get together collaboratively, either each of you have this pulled up on your computer, or if you like to print it out. In this type of work, honestly, I like to print it out and just like jot down all my ideas. But how this is organized is it's first organized by data collection method. So you'll see first, you'll have the teacher focus groups. You're going to go through, and again, I'm going to walk through these steps just showing high level. First, this is where you're going to note some themes, then different data points that you think would be helpful to include in the presentation, the description, along with how to visualize. The next page is for the teacher time diaries. Looks the exact same. Next page is for those observations, and that could be for the planning time and instructional time if you did do that. Then the last page goes into thinking about overarching themes and recommendations. So again, I'll talk about this in the steps, but I highly recommend that you go data collection tool by data collection tool so that you're really able to spend your energy focused on one thing and not kind of jumping around to different data collection tools. And then at the end is when you'll go through and kind of think about what are some overarching themes across these 3 data collection tools, and what are some recommendations that I could imagine from that. So again, that's just high level overview of that document. In the next slides, we're going to walk through how to actually use that. All right, so the first step is, like I said, you're going to work to identify those themes. The good news is most of this work you've already done. Now it's just kind of compiling it and saying, what do we really want to include? So this is, you're going to work from the focus group and time audit data analysis protocols. So those long protocols that you all worked on collaboratively that really work to identify like factual observations and plausible causes. From those, you'll basically review those documents and then brainstorm potential themes to include that summarize what was collected from that data source. So you'll start by listing out all of the themes. I would do that all like independently. Maybe you could even do this before you meet, of going through, jotting down every theme that stands out to you. And then you'll work to narrow it down to a max of 3 themes. I know that sounds like a lot because you'll probably have a lot identified, but I think the first step is you'll each identify all of your themes, combine them into a list, and then take out any duplicates or anything that sounds very similar, and then narrow it down to there of what's really standing out and would be the best way to really theme this data. After you've identified 3 themes, then you are going to identify actual data that kind of support those themes. So really thinking about what really emphasizes those themes that you identified. So working from the actual data. So there's the time audit synthesis document, the observation synthesis document, and the focus group synthesis document. Identify specific data that helps to explain those themes you previously identified. So when Latanya was talking about telling the data story, and then it encompasses the data, narrative, and visuals, the themes are the narrative. That's kind of high level. Now we need that data and visual to kind of give it like the next oomph to really see the whole circle of this is what it's telling. So for example, and I'm sorry, I forget, I think it was Naomi, talked about how you're noticing some discrepancies across campuses. That could be a theme that stands out. And then you could present that campus level data to really emphasize that and show like, these are the discrepancies that we're noticing. And that's how I would bring in and say, this is how we would be presenting that data. If there's not a lot of differences by campus, then you could do it district overall. It's really being able to say and look at, these are the themes, what data and numbers really stand out to us to help tell that story. On the document, this is where you'll list out the data. So if I wanted to include the average number of hours a teacher's worked over the course of a week, I would just write that in the data and then a brief description. Use this as a brainstorming document. Again, we don't want to provide too much data on the slideshow. Again, we only have 30 minutes. So really we want to like have a high level punch to say like, this is the data that we should present that really tells the story. I myself would probably stick with one visual, but if you need to have like a number with a quote or think about just different ways to orient it, you can do that. And then same thing, like I said, start by listing out all of the data that you believe helps tell that story, but then work to narrow it down to a max of 2 points. The next step is to determine how you're going to visualize the data. So once you've actually identified the data that you're going to include, we're going to say, how are we going to visualize it on the presentation? So I'm going to share this resource that we have. I'm going to share my screen to show it, but it's a chart chooser document. You don't have to use this, but I think it's really helpful when you are thinking about how to present your data. So the way that it's organized is it goes into what would you like to present. So first, if you're comparing, so showing the differences or similarities between values, these are some different ways you could present the data. So for instance, if you want to compare by campus, like a horizontal bar chart or vertical bar chart would be a nice way to present that. You could also include another across line that shows the district overall. So then you could show the variance between campuses to that district average. We don't have a lot of change over time data, but this is something we can think about in the future. So when you're looking at and wanting to show how data has changed after maybe this strategy has been implemented, then we could look at this. Parts of a whole. These are different ways that you can show various parts of a whole. And then also progress towards a goal. So that's where I was talking about kind of like a KPI card or something that just shows like a high level percentage of this many teachers reported that they were satisfied with their position, or this many teachers informed or reported that they were going to leave the profession within 2 years. Any kind of high level number that you want to emphasize. Next, there's distribution. So showing how data spread out over an interval or is grouped. And then showing relationships and connections between 2 or more categories. There isn't really anything that I can think of that we would present with this, but again, just different ways for you to think about how you can visualize that data. I'm going to go back to the slideshow. So again, you'll have this resource that you can use. And what we recommend is, as you're going through, you write down the data, the description, and then you can either, a lot of times I like to just sketch out how I want to visualize the data. write down notes of like, we could do a bar graph and have on the x-axis this and y-axis this. Think about just different creative ways of how to visualize that. All right, so now that you have worked through each of the individual data collection methods, again, working by each data collection method. So focusing on focus group data, identifying the themes, data to include, and how to visualize, doing the same for the teacher time diaries, and then the same for the observations. You're ready to go into step 4, which is when you're going to be thinking about overarching themes. So this is on the last page of your brainstorm document. This is when you're thinking about what is standing out to us. Like what, if I were to read through all 3, 6, 9 of those themes, how would I summarize that? So overarching themes that are becoming clear. Again, start by just doing a brain dump, listing out everything. Combine all your thoughts. Combine anything that is duplicative or just seems redundant, and then work from there to really narrow it down to a max of 3 themes. Again, a lot of things I think you'll notice as you go through, you'll see that they're either kind of related or can be combined or are just the same thing. So really have some, I think, strong conversations around what do these themes really mean? Step 5 is going into the recommendations. So based on those 3 finalized themes and what you learned throughout the study, what recommendations do you have as the teacher researchers that you want to share with the DQI team? Again, start by brainstorming all recommendations that you have. Really reflect on what you heard in the focus groups. You guys heard a lot of challenges that teachers are experiencing, as well as what recommendations and strategies that teachers said would work. So think about all of those. Think about, from all the themes I identified, what do you think should be done in your district to help teacher time? And then narrow it down to a max of, I would say, 5 recommendations. That still seems like a lot, but I think giving just, again, being able to share your insights, your role as the teachers, and you having been so close to this data that you'll have some really good insights. All right, so that's steps 1 through 5 of really when you're just brainstorming before you're even thinking about like creating the presentation. This is really doing all of like the heavy thinking work of how do we compile all this data? We have so much stuff. How do we even approach this? So we're going to do a breakout room and give you guys 10 minutes. I know this is 8, but we're a little ahead of schedule. So we'll give you 10 minutes to start working through the brainstorm document as a district team. And we really want you to focus on step 1 of just identifying themes from your focus groups. So working from your focus group data analysis protocol, brainstorm potential themes that summarize what data was collected. Again, start by listing out all the themes and then try and narrow it down to a max of 3 themes. Even if with it, it's only 10 minutes, even if you can only start the brainstorming process, that's fine. We just really want you to be able to kind of practice the process and come back with any questions or clarifying clarifications that you have for this process. When we come back, we'll talk about steps 6 and 7 of how to actually create your presentation using this document. So I'm going to share my screen stop sharing my screen and share the brainstorming document with you. And I'm also going to share with you the your district specific focus group data analysis protocol so that it's easy for you to access. Any questions before we go into breakout rooms? No? All right, there is Temples. Again, you only are able to access your district's document. All right. All right, I'm gonna open up breakout rooms when I can find them. All right, they are opened up. So we will come back together at 4:16 or 4:17. All right, now that you guys had a little bit of time to just kind of look over that brainstorming document and start that process, how did it feel for you, and what questions or clarifications do you have?
I think we were starting to get to a point where we were thinking about like the recommendations and the solutions. And because, we're presenting this to our district first, we're thinking about how specific we need to be with those solutions or recommendations. And then also somebody had brought up, different campuses may have different solutions for those things. But then if we go to this convening in July, I mean, if we're giving the same presentation, that's fine, but does the specificity matter as much to whoever is listening to that convening?
Yeah, I really like the discussion you guys were having. And I like that you were kind of already jumping to the thought of like thinking about recommendations. I think as you're going through, keeping those like on your last page of your brainstorming doc so they kind of keep with you as you're thinking is a really good idea. But then again, making sure that you're really thinking through and getting all of the themes from each data source to make sure that there's not any gaps. Because I think as you go through each, you're going to begin to understand a bigger picture of your your district's data story. And then you might get even more specific with the recommendations. I will leave this to Deborah, but I would say typically with recommendations, when I do like an evaluation or any sort of study, sometimes they are pretty specific because that's what the data is saying. And it's kind of like, this is a specific action that can be taken. Sometimes it is a little bit more broad. I think really let the data guide you to be able to say, don't get overly specific if there isn't something that kind of supports that. But if it is, you're able to really look at it. And even if it does look like different approaches at each campus might be the better approach, but there's still that overall strategy, that's something that you can recommend.
Yeah, I'm thinking because the afternoon you all will dig pretty deep into your needs assessment and you'll really be digging into that data as a team. I think trying to keep a high level, like especially when you're thinking about a district level, a high level recommendation may be okay here because you can present it. And then when you go into that afternoon session, you can really dig deep. So, the high level overview recommendation for the district is to look at master schedules and try to add in at least 60 more minutes each week of planning time, right? So it's a little bit specific, but overarching for the whole district. Then as a campus, you can each go and say, how does that look at this campus? And so also, I think you're going to get pretty deep into your needs assessment. The other part of this is you're presenting it out to everyone because it is some peer-to-peer learning. That's what you're going to get on that number 4 objective there is learning from other peers. So you may find that other districts are having the same concerns or recommendations. And so then that can kind of spark some conversations and ideas. They may already have something for yours, right? So you may have 5 different recommendations and they are like, oh, we've already done this for that one. And this may be a small change or tweak that you can be making. So it's also a peer-to-peer learning And that's what we're hoping the value you get out of presenting across it. The morning you will be in mixed groups. You will not just sit with district members, you'll sit with a mix of everybody to learn. So I think if you want to start high level, and then you all as a team can get deeper that afternoon. Also, when you present to your district teams at their coaching call, I think that's a good time to start high level, and they can say, when you present again at the convening, you know, can you add this clarity, or can you add this to it, or can you speak to this a little bit more? I think that'll help you all prepare with your questions and answers and things like that too.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And that was a perfect segue and why I went back to that slide, Deborah. Any other questions, reflections, or clarifications around that process?
We just kind of talked about, we had a meeting yesterday as a team, and we had a really good meeting. We got a lot of work done. And so we didn't get a whole lot into actually deciding on themes today. We just want more time to look over all the data and really find the overarching ones, and then we're going to meet again. But one of our thoughts was, after we decide on the themes, to make one of the recommendations, maybe say like, we want this, but we want it to specifically work for each campus, and kind of leave it at that. And then in the afternoon, we can kind of delve more into how it would specifically meet the needs of each campus, which I love what she just said, because I feel like it goes with what we were talking about in our group. Hopefully that makes sense. And yeah, so that's what we talked about.
Yeah, that sounds great. All right. So the next couple slides that I am going to go through are, and it's the next, I think, 9 slides. So we're kind of going to go through them a little bit quickly. But we're going to talk about how to actually update that template presentation. And we're going to kind of compare the template to the example. Also want to emphasize that we're only asking you to use this overall framework of the presentation. Both of you all will be presenting kind of in the same way of showing like, these were the data collection methods. This is what the data said. These are our overall findings, and these are recommendations. But on the actual slides, change them however you want. However you want to like visually present the data. If you want to include graphics, visuals, it's completely up to you. Be completely creative, however you want to approach it. I also wanted to share that we are also going to upload a couple resources to the Data Hub that you can use for tools to visualize the data. So we have some template charts. So it's like an example, like a bar chart that's already created that you can go and enter your data in. And then you can just copy that bar chart, update it to be your district colors. There's like 7 different types of charts. So we're going to upload that on the hub for you to use. All right. So the first page that you'll go through on the first couple of pages are the intro slides. The first one is when you're just going to be introducing your teacher researcher team. So just include some pictures of yourself so they know who you're talking to, what campus you work at, in the grade level that you teach at. The next page is your district page. This is where you'll include your district logo, the total number of students at your district, total campuses, the demographics, and then other TEA initiatives. But we want you to be kind of brief with this because I think there's only 2 minutes allocated, but it's really just sharing important aspects of your district. Thinking about like when you're reviewing data or trying to learn about a district, what information and background do you want to know about them? So just kind of like that background to lay the groundwork before you go into presenting your data. The next page is where you'll be focusing or discussing your district focus. So you'll identify your area of inquiry, which again, both of you did do unsustainable workloads. For this, you'll just delete teacher isolation and suboptimal resource allocation and just keep unsustainable workloads. And then you'll also include your goals for the study. For this, you'll connect with your district quality improvement team, because this was discussed at that kickoff. And then they took notes on this at their coaching call. The last intro slide is where you will actually talk about the data collection methods. So for us, you did teacher focus groups, planning and potentially instructional time observations, and then teacher time diaries. I also forgot to mention that anything in red in the template is what you'll update. So you'll notice that the black will stay because that's consistent for all of you, but the red is what you'll need to update. So on this, you'll include the number of focus groups that were held, remember, across all 3 campuses, the total number of focus group participants, the grades and subjects represented, the number of teacher time diaries completed, and the grades and subjects represented by those time diaries, and then the number of observations and what was observed. So again, this is just helpful to lay the foundation of what data was collected, where it came from, and who was represented. And it's just best practices and being able to say, this is how we collected the data, this was who was represented. Now we're going to get into the actual data slides. This is where you're going to use that brainstorming document, and you'll really do that in slides 6, 7, and 8. Each of these 3 slides are the exact same, except for the title at the top. They're either focus groups, teacher time diaries, or observations. So there's 1 slide for each of those data collection methods. So when we're on the teacher time diary slide, what you'll do is you'll work from that brainstorming document. Once you've narrowed it down to those 3 themes, you'll just copy those over into your slide. Remember, that'll be the narrative piece of this data story in the slide. Next, you will identify the data that you said you were going to visualize and how you were going to visualize it. And then you'll put that visualization right here. Again, don't feel like you have to be stuck on one visualization. I wouldn't go overboard because less is always more in data storytelling, but being able to have something really impactful there. So that will be how you kind of, again, are combining that narrative with the data and the visual to really give that oomph. These are a couple example data slides. So this is an example focus group slide. So we have the 3 themes, the themes that emerged. Non-instructional burdens are draining time and energy. Relationship building and emotional support are central to teaching. And collaboration and expanded roles reflect a broader definition of teaching. So those were the themes that emerged from these focus groups. And then to really emphasize this theme, we included a de-identified quote from the focus group. So I became a teacher to teach, not to spend hours chasing paperwork and sitting in meetings that don't impact my students. If we could clear even a little of that, I'd have more energy for the part of the job that matters most. So we felt that that quote kind of emphasized all of those themes and helped tell that story. With the focus group, there was other themes that stood out of this many teachers continue to emphasize this note around like their distractions that they're experiencing or what's taking away from them their instructional time. We could also include that. Here is an example observation slide. So again, we present these 3 themes, which was instructional planning often competes with operational demands, and relationship-focused conversations occur, but are not embedded in the PLC agenda. And then we felt as though the data presenting the percentage of PLC time observed that was spent on the goals of the time or aligned time was a good way to really emphasize those 2 themes. So it shows elementary average, junior high school average, and overall average of how much time was aligned. And then obviously vice versa, how much time was not aligned. So really showing that the operational demands are taking away from their planning time. This example is showing a potential time diary slide. So again, showing the 3 themes, the largest amount of teacher time was spent monitoring students. Between 17 and 26% of teacher time was spent on teaching lessons. The majority of teacher time was spent on activities aligned to their required duties. And then we presented how many hours did teachers on average work over the course of a week, again, showing by campus and then overall, to be able to again emphasize those themes. When you're presenting these slides, and we'll talk about this a little bit at the end, but it's always good to have like your narrative, not like a script, but additional data points that really supplement what's being presented. Don't just talk straight to the graph, kind of add some richness to it of what's really standing out. You'll get a lot of this from your data analysis protocol of what stood out to you and what were some plausible causes. So really telling the story that encompasses both those themes and those visuals. All right, so those are the 3 data slides that are really running that home, 6, 7, and 8. After the data slides, we get into the summary slides. This first one is presenting those overarching themes across all the data collection methods. So this comes from, again, your brainstorming document on that last page. And we want you to include kind of in a descriptive title of the theme, a longer description of the theme, and then where that theme was observed. So in what data collection methods. So across those 3 example data slides that I shared, these are kind of the 3 themes that stood out. The scope of teaching extends far beyond instruction, and it's taking a toll. The description of that responsibilities are often invisible in traditional definitions of teaching. That was observed in the focus groups, observations, and time diaries. The next one, time for instruction and collaboration is squeezed by competing priorities. TLC observations reveal that even designated planning time is often diverted to logistical tasks. Again, that was observed in the focus groups, observations, and time diaries. And then lastly, emotional and relational work is central, but lacks structural support. So there was a disconnect between what teachers value and what the system supported, and that was noted as contributing to burnout. Again, observed in all 3 of those data collection methods. So you might still have additional talking points to add to them, but being able to summarize the description of the theme, kind of some definition of it, as well as where it was from. So being able to back it up and say this was observed in the focus groups and planning, or just the time diaries, or where that stood out to you. And then the last summary slide is what can we do? So your recommendations. I think you don't have to organize it by this way, but we organized it kind of by theme, and we thought about, based on each theme, what recommendation could we make? If this doesn't help, like you don't think this way, that's completely fine. Just come up with a list of recommendations. But basically for each of the themes, we said these were different recommendations that could be taken. So for theme 1, that the scope of teaching extends far beyond instruction, it's taking a toll. 1, use this audit to make the invisible visible. Again, it's pretty broad, but that could be taken in a bunch of different ways of communicating this data out, sharing it back with the people who was collected it from. That's a pretty short-term next step, will be pretty influential. Then there's revised job descriptions, evaluation frameworks, or PD frameworks to acknowledge and account for these broader responsibilities, reducing the mismatch between expectations and reality. The next theme, time for instruction and collaboration, is squeezed by competing priorities. A recommendation, identify common logistical disruptions, examples, data reporting, student tracking. This could be done using expansion of the time diaries, and develop streamlined systems or identify central staff to handle them, reducing the burden on teachers during their allocated planning time. And then lastly, emotional and relational work is central, but lacks structural support. Advocate for frameworks like Danielson or similar to explicitly value emotional labor or the relationships with students, families, and colleagues by including them as core competencies and the evaluation or reflection tools. So again, they're kind of high level recommendations, but then when you have those conversations with the districts, when you're going through the needs assessment process, that's when you can provide more granularity. And we think this would work at this campus, this could go to this campus, and so forth. The last page in the slide deck is just the table discussion. So after the 30 minutes of your discussion, each presentation will end with 5 minutes of table discussion, where there's some just probing questions. The last step is to practice. So we are asking that you have the first draft of your presentation done again by either, I put on here June 25, but just by your coaching call, and that's either on the 26th or 27th. Again, this is so you can practice and run through it with the DQI team. They can ask any clarifying questions, you can update, and then just have your final presentation completed by July 9th. And I know that Deborah's going to have you share it with her. So then at the convening, she'll have it downloaded, ready to go. You don't have to worry about any of the technical pieces. You'll just come up at your allotted time and your presentation will be pulled up and ready to go. After we've gone through that whole process of those 7 steps of beginning from the brainstorming, then working through actually creating the presentation, how are you all feeling? Either thumbs up, middle, as in, I don't know, like thumbs up, good, middle, I'm okay, down, not good. And be honest. Okay, I'm not seeing any down, so that's good. Good, okay. That, I was just hoping for no down. That's good to hear. And again, we're gonna give you some time at the end of this session to go in and do some additional planning, to think about what this looks like. I actually think that might be the next slide. All right, so we have a little bit of extra time. What we are going to do is in, again, district specific breakout rooms, we're going to have you spend 10 minutes discussing the following. So just more of logistics. When can you meet to prepare for the presentation? And then what will each person's role in that be? So I'm going to open up the breakout rooms. Again, even if these questions are helpful for you, we just want to give you some time to get some dates on the calendar, start thinking about logistically, how can you get that first draft ready by the end of June? Any questions before I send you into breakout rooms? All right, I'm going to open them up and we will come back together at 4:49. Again, if you have any questions, concerns, anything, always reach out to us. We're happy to help. We're going to upload those visualization tools for you to use to the hub, and we'll share where those are linked in our kind of follow-up email that LaTanya will send tomorrow. We're also going to include a resource on how to use AI to just ChatGPT to help think about how to visualize the data as well. We're going to include, it has like the different prompts that were asked, as well as a resulting bar chart that was created. The next really brief section we're going to walk through is just kind of preparing for the relational aspect of the convening and preparing for any questions and pushback that come from the data. So first, we're going to talk about preparing for pushback and share out 5 strategies to take when navigating some tough data conversations or how to handle any pushback that you're experiencing. So first, we want to acknowledge emotional responses and don't avoid them. They're going to happen and they should be acknowledged. Recognize that this data can, especially in a time study, feel really personal. This can be done by simply stating upfront that it's okay to feel defensive, and this is part of the process. Again, don't try and like hide underneath it. Really emphasize this is normal. This is part of it. 2, we want to create safety by setting ground rules up from the start. So start your discussion with any shared ground rules. A lot of your teams already have these norms set in place when you're having PLC discussions, when you're reviewing data, of really emphasizing confidentiality, respect, and a lack of judgment. There's no bad recommendations. There's nothing, no one needs to shy away from not saying something. Everyone's here because they are playing an important role in this work. Third, always take it back to that shared goal of improving how teachers supported so that they can best support student learning. I think a lot of times in data conversations, we can go down rabbit holes and kind of get thrown into, well, this is happening at this campus, this is happening at this campus. Maybe that's the case, but again, we're thinking about as a district level, our whole goal is to support teachers so they can support student learning. Again, also emphasizing this is not evaluative or punitive. It's a whole process of continuous improvement. And then when or if you're experiencing pushback, questioning or doubt, you can use the pause, paraphrase, and probe approach. So pause, first letting emotion surface without immediate reaction. Paraphrasing, what I hear you saying is XYZ. And then probing, asking them to tell more about it. What is your experience? What is letting you to have this reaction, to really then get at root causes and be able to distill further of why is this feeling come up and what does this mean and how can we use this as almost another data point. And then fifth is don't or avoiding the data trap. You don't want to jump to explain away or justify numbers right away. Really working to ask, what questions does this data raise for us instead of what's wrong with this data? I know a lot of times, again, when people become defensive, it's kind of, well, this isn't what I expected to see. Or when I collected this data, this is what it said. This is what was collected in the teacher time study. This is what the current district is showing. So what is this telling us? What is the questions that are raising from us rather than trying to justify them away? Next are just preparing for any questions that may arise. Some of this is a little different at the convening because we already kind of have the cadence set, but even just thinking about in general, as you're preparing, as you transition from your role as like the teacher researcher to more of like the teacher researcher consultant. So first, as you guys are practicing, brainstorm any questions that you may get in advance. So think about questions, if this was the first time you were viewing this data, what would come into your mind? And this is what's really going to be helpful for you to practice preparing to the DQI team. They'll have some questions that you can say, oh, that is a good point. Like I could reframe the theme in this way, or I could present this data instead. Really thinking about that. Also, don't be afraid to ask for more time if you don't have the answer. Being a data person, don't feel like you always have to have the answer. Sometimes saying, I'm not sure, but I can get back to you is the best response because then you can go and dive deeper into it. Again, you just collected so much data and you only have 30 minutes to present. You're not going to be able to share everything and anything, nor are you going to be able to have every data point in the back of your head. But you have it all saved in the Google Drive, so you're able to go back and reference it. Tell the audience in advance when you'll be taking questions. In this case, it'll be at the end of the presentation. And then kind of similar to number 3, keeping extra data in your back pocket. So while you're preparing for your presentation, think about any additional data that you could have in your notes section that kind of supplement those themes or the visuals that you are presenting to further tell that data story. Or just if certain questions do arise, kind of having that data in your back pocket is always helpful. All right, so that was a lot of material that we went through today, but hoping that you have a little bit more clarity on what your district presentation is going to look like, as well as how you can kind of approach beginning this process. As for what's coming up, the deliverables that are due on June 18th are your focus group data analysis protocol, as well as your time audit data analysis protocol. So make sure that your teacher researchers have all met and you've gone through the data analysis process for both of those. From starting tomorrow through June 26th, we'll have you be working on that first draft of your presentation. So again, don't even touch the presentation until you've kind of started working through that brainstorming document. Then you might be able to, like, you each individually work through the brainstorming document, you get together, go through, talk about themes, data, come to a consensus, and then maybe you identify one person as a presentation lead who is actually entering all of that into the presentation. Whatever works best for your team. On June 26th or the 27th, you're going to join your DQI team coaching call to deliver the draft presentation. After that, until July 9th is when you'll be finalizing your presentation. July 9th is the in-person convening. And then our next time together, we will be together obviously in person in July, but then our next training is on August 27th. And that's when we'll be talking about your role as a consultant and kind of how you're transitioning from doing the research to now a consultant role for your DQI team. So your immediate next steps: ensure you've uploaded to the hub by June 18th that focus group data analysis protocol, as well as the time audit data analysis protocol. As a teacher researcher team, identify the data that you'll present and then prepare for your draft presentation to review at the June coaching call. That is all we have for you today. We're going to put in the chat the exit ticket. If you can please complete that as a reminder. This gives us important feedback as well as counts as your attendance for participating. Again, we'll have all these materials uploaded to the hub by tomorrow, and we'll send out that follow-up email. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out. But we're excited to see kind of the culmination of all this work and to see kind of the first iterations of the presentations at those coaching calls. Otherwise, thank you all for joining, and know it was a lot, but again, reach out. We are here to support in any way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Thank y'all.